Hi there guys, got a video here for you today on the Anschutz 9015, and what we're going to be doing in this one is doing a full strip down of the rifle. Now we won't be rebuilding it in this video, that'll come a little later as there's a few things that I want to look at inside the rifle, hopefully to modify. So first thing that's going to come off is the stock. I'm going to do that by loosening or removing the two stock bolts. So this one at the front is using a 4mm Allen key, and the one at the back is using a 3mm Allen key. Once they're both undone, we can lift the stock off and I'll put this to one side. Next thing we've got to do is remove the cylinder. So my one's a little different from your rifle in that I have a quick fill fitted to my one, and this makes it a little more difficult to remove the cylinder from the rifle. What I'm going to have to do is take the barrel out, remove the cylinder, refit the barrel and then dry fire the rifle to remove any air that's in the plenum. That's only because of the shroud setup I'm currently running, but once we get a proper shroud sorted for it we won't have to do that anymore. But that's what I'm going to have to do for my rifle. So first thing I'm going to do is come in the end here with a 3mm Allen key and loosen the two barrel tension grub screws. They don't need to be done out all the way. Then we can remove the barrel, stick that to one side. Then we can unscrew the cylinder. With the cylinder removed, I'll put the barrel back on and we'll dry fire the rifle. Right, with that done we know the rifle is completely out of there. Now like I said before, you won't have to do that for your rifle, but it's just something I have to do for my rifle at the moment with the current quick fill setup. Although once we get a proper shroud sorted I won't have to do any of that. So we can take the barrel off completely now. And we're left with a block. Next up we're going to separate the two halves of the block, so we will have the back half, this black part, and the front half, this grey part. To do that we're going to tip the block up on the end and loosen and remove these 4 screws here. So with a 3mm Allen key, insert that in the end there, just undo them one at a time. Now from the factory these are really quite tight, so you might need to use a T-handled Allen key or something similar. Right, with all 4 loose, we've got to be nice and careful as the valve is sandwiched between the two halves. So there we have it there. This is the valve, so we'll stick that to one side and we're left with this front piece here. Tip out the 4 bolts and we'll stick them to one side. This is the front half here. We tip this end out and we get the valve return spring out from this hole here. There is also an O-ring in this seat, so we'll just remove that so it doesn't get lost. And again I'll be sticking that to one side. The next piece we can remove from the front block here is the regulator. So in the bottom here we loosen this grub screw, that's using a 2.5mm Allen key. Doesn't need to be done out all the way. And from this end we can just simply poke the reg out with just a piece of Delrin or a piece of wood or something nice and soft. We'll push it out there. And there the reg is there. This, I'm told, is the new high power regulator. It's slightly different from the ones in earlier models. This particular rifle is a serial number 319 rifle, which I'm led to believe is the newest iteration of the rifles. Apparently on older models this part here wasn't turned down, and the main reason for turning this part of the regulator down is to increase plenum volume. One of the main problems with the 9015 is that the plenum size, so the size of the regulated air chamber, is too small in order to achieve 12 foot-pounds, and what I think a lot of the tuners do is bore different parts of the block out in order to increase plenum volume. Something we're probably going to be doing to this rifle, even though it has the new regulator style, but whatever we do to the block will show on the channel. So we might as well take it apart now. So I'll stick the block to one side and that's pretty much all we can get out of the block, and we'll start work on the regulator. Before we take it apart though, what we'll need to do is find the approximate current set pressure. So I haven't actually got a regulator tester for this regulator at the moment. I will be making one in the near future, but for now what we're going to do is actually measure the current set distance of this adjustment nut here to this outer face here. So using our calipers, just the back edge of the calipers there, then we're measuring about 1.55. We'll take a number of measurements, 1.56, and just find sort of the average, 1.54. So if you didn't see my last video on the Airmax Catran regulator, we did use this measuring method to really accurately set the regulator pressure before and after. So I have a regulator tester for the Catran. We measured it before using the calipers, and then we measured the regulator set pressure on a regulator tester. Then when we rebuilt it, we measured it, put it back to where it was before we took it apart, and then re-measured the regulator pressure using the reg tester, and it was within a bar. So done right, that's really quite an accurate way to determine the current set pressure. You don't actually find out a pressure, so like a 90 bar set or anything like that, but if we set it to back where it was, I know it shoots good now, so if we set it back to where it is now, it's going to shoot well in the future. But once that's done, we can loosen this back nut here using a 5mm Allen key. Then we'll remove this back nut here. Don't drop it like I did. There it is there. Now to get the Belvilles out, what we're going to do is take a thin Allen key, put it on the top of this piston here, and then tip the regulator up. So we get most of the stack out there. There is a couple more Belville washers just stuck in the base there. So I'm just going to knock them out like so. And there is the Belville stack that's currently in the rifle. So they're stacked in pairs, two this way, like so. I have taken this regulator apart before, so the stuff on the Belville washers isn't dirt, it's actually just dry lube. Next thing what we've got to do is loosen this grub screw here. Now this is done with a 0.9mm Allen key, and the grub screw itself is stuck in there with sealant. So what I had to do was being really nice and careful, just feeling the grub screw back and forward, just gently working the grub screw loose. Once it broke free it was alright, but from the factory that was really quite difficult to remove. And as you can see there, a tiny little grub screw on the end there. So we'll stick that somewhere safe, and we'll stick the adjuster to one side. Next thing we can do is loosen this body itself. So what we're going to do is stick a flat bladed screwdriver in the top there and unscrew it. Pulling it out nice and carefully. So there is the top part there. The body still has the piston in it, which we're going to push out now. So using something nice and soft like a piece of plastic, we're just going to push the piston out so the piston comes out that way, like so. We'll stick that to one side, and that's the body fully disassembled. I will go over the O-ring sizes in the reassembly portion of the video, so I'll try and pull them from the Anschutz site for you. The next thing we're going to do is separate these two pieces here. So to do that, what we're going to do is remove this O-ring. So we're just going to pinch the sides of it and lift it off nice and carefully. And then we're going to install this whole assembly in a collet block. So I'm using a 10mm collet there. What I'll do is I'll get this nice and tight, get it set in the vise, and then I'll undo this top piece here. So unfortunately that's the only way I could find to separate these two parts safely and without damaging either one of them. This was really quite tight from the factory, and even putting the grub screw in the side and trying to de-seat the two parts wasn't successful. All that happened was this whole body here spun on the grub screw. So the only way I could get them out was using a collet block. But it's nice and easy with a collet block. And there we have it there. So there's not much in here. There is this little plunger piece here. I'll explain exactly how this regulator works in a second. But as you see there, this little plunger piece does have some sort of seal on the end of it. Right then, what I thought we'd do very briefly is go over how exactly these regulators work. So we have the components laid out here. We have the reg body, we have the reg adjuster screw here, we have the piston, we have this brass inlet piece here, we also have the closing sealing valve. So this piece here, this has the job of opening the one-way valve of the cylinder and also allowing air this way into the regulator. The pin here has a seal on the face which we showed earlier. This little black piece on the end of this pin is the sealing face, and that seats in this little brass piece here, and if you look very carefully you can just see a black halo in there. That's where that seat goes. Right then, so under normal working conditions, when the cylinder is full and the regulator is pressurised, this pin here is sealed against the inside of this brass piece here. The piston here is touching, or close to touching, the end of the pin, but not opening it. Belleville washers are trying to force the piston open, but are being stopped by regulator pressure on this side of the piston, pushing it closed. So when we take a shot, regulator pressure drops on this side of the piston, allowing the Belleville washers to open this valve here. So the Belleville washers are able to overcome regulator pressure and open this little pin here, allowing bottle pressure to flow through the system and into the plenum. As it pressurises, the force on this side of the piston increases, and when it gets to regulator set pressure, it knocks the piston back and allows this pin here to again seal on the brass piece here. And then we're back to working conditions where the regulator is pressurised, as is the cylinder, and we're ready to take a shot. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little different from the standard piston types that we normally see in the sort of Catrans and the standard rifles, but it's a regulator style that works really quite well in the Anschutz. Right then, so I'll get this cleared away and we'll resume with the rest of the disassembly. So next we'll bring back the block and we'll start work on the block itself. The first thing we're going to do is remove the valve so it doesn't get damaged. So this piece here, it's really long and thin on the Anschutz. It does have a face seal, that black piece there on the end of the valve itself. So we'll stick this to one side so it doesn't get lost or broken. Next thing we're going to do is pull back the stabiliser and we'll just remove the valve block as well. So we'll just take that out there. There the transfer port is, so the valve seals on this face here, and when it's knocked off by the hammer it allows air to flow through here, through the transfer port, up the bottom. See that green piece there? That's the bottom of the transfer port on the stabiliser. That flows through there, through that hole there, and out the barrel. So we'll stick that to one side. So next thing we're going to do is remove this trigger plate here. On my one I've replaced the standard nasty Phillips heads or cross-headed bolts here, and I've replaced them with just standard Allen keys. No idea why they use Phillips heads from the factory. They do. So I ripped them out and just replaced them with some nice short M4 bolts. They just fit in much nicer, much better. I really don't like mixed fasteners on rifles. No need for it. But we'll take them out. That allows us to remove this plate here. We're removing it nice and carefully. So we have the cocking mechanism there, or part of it, and the other part there. So we'll lock these two pieces back together and put them to one side. Next, using a 2mm Allen key, what we're going to do is remove these two bolts here, and that allows us to remove the trigger as one whole unit. Now we're not going to disassemble the trigger in this video, it's a rather complicated bit of kit, but I will probably make another video in the future going over all the bits and pieces to it. It is a really nice trigger unit. If you can look there, all these sears were polished from the factory. I haven't done no polishing in there. and you look at the length of that sear there, that's what allows you to get such a light trigger, such a nice trigger on this rifle, with tons of adjustments. So we'll stick that to one side. Next we'll pull out the hammer spring assembly. So just push the hammer spring out the back there. So eagle-eyed among you may notice that this is an SSG. So the hammer spring is captive in that little plate there with a hammer spring guide on the end. Very, very similar to an SSG. So SSG or spring stop guide, we did make one of these for the Benjamin Aquila. So if you're interested in how exactly they work, you can watch that video. I won't go over it here, this video is probably already long enough. Next we have the hammer. So just gently pull the hammer out. Now I haven't polished the hammer, this is how it came. So I think this is slightly different from older models. I believe older models didn't have this. It's not a polished finish, it's almost like a ground finish on the edges of the hammer. So we'll stick that to one side. And next we can remove the stabilizer. So first thing we're going to do is loosen this bolt here, or this grub screw. That's with a 1.5mm Allen key. Pull that out. I'm going to remove mine entirely, but you could leave it in if you wanted to. And then next, using a nice big flat bladed screwdriver, we can remove this back piece here. I think Anschutz recommend to use a coin to remove this, but makes no difference really. There's the back piece there. And next we can remove the stabilizer entirely. So my one was unlocked, and I believe this is the new style of stabilizer, so there's no magnets anymore, or not on this one at least. There is a clip in the inside of the stabilizer which we'll take out in a minute. This is just a solid lump of steel, this is just a buffer piece, there's nothing actually back here. Take that off, it's just a hole to fit this buffer piece into. It does have this friction grub screw on the side here, which is adjusted on this side. I won't bother taking that out, you can see exactly how that works. What I'll do is I'll explain how the stabilizer works when we come to rebuild it. I think that'd be more appropriate. Next we can remove the stabilizer itself. So this is done with, or this is attached using C-clips. So we see one in here, which we're going to remove now. Easiest way I've found to do these is just with a nice thin flat bladed screwdriver. It's going to be hard for me to do and show the camera if I'm honest, but I'll try my best. There we have it there. So I don't know how much of that you're going to see. It is quite hard to hold it, push with the screwdriver and remove the pin without it pinging off. So you're better off putting it on a nice flat bench, pushing on the side of the pin. With the flat bladed screwdriver you could probably get away with slightly bigger than this one. This one is a 3mm wide one, but just nice and carefully. Now with the C-clip removed, what we can do is remove the pin nice and carefully, so pushing it up there, supporting the cocking arm, oops, and pushing the pin out. The cocking arm will then go floppy. Before we pull the stabilizer itself out, what we'll do is we'll need to remove the brake. So this little grub screw here just applies some tension on the side of the stabilizer itself, or the outer, this part of the stabilizer, the outer sheath of the stabilizer, and just makes it feel a little smoother as you cock it backwards and forwards. So there's the grub screw. There is a Delrin, little Delrin disc in there as well as a spring. So just nice and careful removal of those two pieces there. So the Delrin piece is still in there, but what we're going to do is remove the outer side of the stabilizer. So there's the clip there, and the stabilizer itself, really nice and simply hooks in there, and then air pushes it off. We'll talk more exactly how this works when we get to the rebuild, as we've got to readjust it and get it working right. So I'll talk more about it when we actually come to rebuilding it. So we've still got the Delrin piece in here, so what we're going to do is just tap that out. So there it comes there. Again, just sticking it to one side. With that out, we only have a few more things to remove from the block. So for my rifle, I'm going to be leaving the cocking arm on. I just don't see any reason why I'd want to take it off. If you did want to take yours off though, you do have to undo this screw here and also this screw here. You may need to remove the C-clip in order to get better access to those screws, but these two here are much easier to remove as they're nice and out in the open. You can do them the same way we remove the one on the side of the stabiliser, just with a nice flat bladed screwdriver. Get in there, just push them off nice and carefully. Next thing we can remove is this part here. Again, probably not a part that you're ever going to want to remove, but with a Phillips head screwdriver we'll undo this part here, like so, and then from this side you can just gently push this piece out here. So again, you'd never need to take this off in proper operation of the rifle. All this does is ride on the hammer spring assembly here and lock it in one orientation. So that just rides in there and stops the hammer spring from twisting if you're adjusting it or under normal operation. But we've got it out, so we'll stick it to one side. Right then, so with that removed, that's the block pretty much fully disassembled up until this point. We do still have obviously the cocking arm and the trigger training mode here, both of which I'm not going to be taking out. There is, if you look on the front here, a little grub screw here. If you take that grub screw out, underneath will be a spring and a ball bearing. That's what gives you the detent there. So if you needed to take that ball bearing out, give it a little grease, that's not a problem. Although what is the problem is this little roll pin here. So this is banged in from the factory and it would be quite difficult to remove without breaking it. So I'm going to be leaving my one in. But apart from that, there we have the block that's fully disassembled. Everything we want to take off is taken off. The last thing we have is the stabiliser itself. So this little unit here has an O-ring. This one here, hopefully the camera will pick that up. We'll be taking that out and replacing it in the rebuild section of this video. We also have this seal here, and we also have this roll pin here, which if we banged that out we'd be able to remove the tip from the stabiliser itself. Look down in the stabiliser, I don't think the camera will pick that up, but there is nothing in there. It's just this little clip in the top. I'm not going to be banging my roll pin out. I don't see a reason to be honest, but if you wanted to get yours out, just a nice clean punch in that hole there, just tap it through nice and gently, and that will remove the pin and allow you to separate the two pieces. The very last thing we have is the cylinder. Now I'm not going to be taking the cylinder apart for now, so all it has normally is a gauge fitted in the end, and on this end this fitting here. We will be removing this fitting at a later date. I do plan on having a look in here and seeing if we can modify a regulator to fit in the end here, possibly using the Anschutz original part, fitting it in the cylinder so we use the front block as a plenum, and that will remove any bottlenecks that the plenum may have on the rifle itself. The 9015 is renowned for having a very small plenum, so hopefully fitting a regulator in the cylinder will remove any of the negative effects that the small plenum has on the rifle. But for now guys, that's going to about do it for this one. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.